If you're African, you may soon be banned from coming to the U.S. The Trump administration is considering travel restrictions on 22 African nations.
The re-emergence of Donald Trump as the President of the United States has unleashed a storm of policies aimed at Africa, a continent long exploited yet brimming with untapped potential. From slashing USAID funding to imposing draconian travel bans, Trump's administration has declared an unapologetic war on African nations, targeting their economies, their dignity, and their sovereignty. The latest blow, proposed expansion of travel restrictions to include 25 African countries, following an earlier ban on 7 others, including Chad, has sent shockwaves across the continent. For corrupt African leaders who have grown fat on Western patronage, these moves have induced panic, exposing their fragility and dependence. Yet, for visionaries like Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Trump's actions are not a death sentence but a clarion call to break free from neo-colonial chains and forge a path of self-reliance. Now the question remains, why is Donald Trump doing this? Will African leader kneel and beg for Donald Trump to lift this ban? Let's find out. Since reclaiming the White House in January 2025, Donald Trump has wasted no time in reviving and expanding his controversial travel bans, with Africa bearing the brunt of his policies. On June 4, 2025, Trump signed a proclamation barring entry to citizens from 12 countries, 7 of which are African: Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan, citing nebulous concerns about foreign terrorists and national security threats. The move was met with widespread condemnation across the continent. The African Union, in a rare show of unity, issued a statement expressing deep concern and calling for a more consultative approach, preserve decades of diplomatic ties built on mutual respect. But Trump's administration doubled down. A leaked State Department cable, signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and reported by The Washington Post on June 14, 2025, revealed plans to expand the travel ban to an additional 36 countries, 25 of which are African: Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Egypt, Ethiopia, Gabon, Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, Malawi, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, São Tomé and Príncipe, Senegal, South Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The cable outlined a litany of concerns, from unreliable identity documents and questionable passport security to visa overstays, lack of cooperation on deportations, and allegations of anti-Semitic and anti-American activity. These nations have been given a 60-day ultimatum to meet stringent US benchmarks or face full or partial entry bans, a move that threatens to sever economic, educational, and cultural ties with the United States. For African leaders who have long relied on Western goodwill to prop up their regimes, this escalation has triggered a crisis of existential proportions. In Nigeria, government officials are reportedly in a frenzy, lobbying Washington to avoid the expanded ban, during the loss of US visas for their children studying at Ivy League universities and their own frequent jaunts to New York and Miami. In Ghana, the threat of isolation has sparked panic, with officials scrambling to draft compliance plans to meet US demands. In Ethiopia, a key US ally, the government is reeling from the prospect of losing access to American markets and remittances from its diaspora, a lifeline for an economy battered by conflict and inflation. These leaders, who have grown lazy and weak under the shadow of Western patronage, are now exposed as emperors with no clothes, their dependence on foreign aid and approval laid bare. Chad, one of the first African nations targeted in the initial ban, responded with a boldness that stunned observers. President Mahamat Idris Deby Itno announced a reciprocal ban on US citizens, declaring, "Chad is a sovereign nation, and we will not bow to insults." This tit-for-tat retaliation sent a powerful message. Africa will not be bullied into submission. Yet for many other leaders, the fear of economic and diplomatic isolation looms large, revealing a continent divided between those clinging to the West and those daring to forge a new path. Trump's assault on Africa began even before the travel bans, with his administration's decision to slash USAID funding across the continent. This move, announced in early 2025, was a body blow to governments that relied heavily on US assistance to fund development projects, or, in many cases, to line the pockets of corrupt elites. In Ghana, the closure of USAID programs is estimated to have cost the country tens of millions in funding for health, education, and infrastructure projects, prompting a desperate scramble to secure alternative donors. In Nigeria, officials are grappling with the loss of programs that, while often inefficient, provided a veneer of progress to mask systemic corruption. Across the continent, leaders who had grown accustomed to USAID's largesse are now facing the harsh reality of their own mismanagement. For decades, USAID has been a double-edged sword in Africa. Marketed as a tool for development, much of the aid has been siphoned off by corrupt leaders, funding lavish lifestyles, offshore accounts, and bloated bureaucracies. In many cases, USAID projects have prioritized foreign contractors and NGOs over local communities, perpetuating a cycle of dependency that stifles genuine progress. Hospitals built with US funds often lack staff or equipment. Schools remained underfunded, and roads crumbled while elites drove imported SUVs. The aid system, designed to keep Africa tethered to Western interests, has enriched a select few while leaving millions in poverty. Yet, Trump's aid cuts have inadvertently sparked a revolution of self-reliance in some corners of the continent. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, stands as a beacon of what is possible when a nation rejects the shackles of neo-colonialism. When Trump announced the USAID cuts, Burkina Faso's Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Passa Wende Cabre, declared that the country had achieved 91% of its humanitarian goals in 2023 without US support. President Traoré himself dismissed the notion that foreign aid is a prerequisite for development, stating in a 2023 speech, "We've received French aid for 63 years, but our country hasn't developed. Cutting it off won't kill us, it will push us to work and rely on ourselves." This defiance has resonated across Africa, inspiring a new generation of leaders and citizens to rethink their dependence on the West. Under Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso is not merely surviving, it is thriving, despite facing sanctions from Western powers and international institutions like the African Union and ECOWAS. Traoré, a 36-year-old military leader who seized power in a 2022 coup, has become a Pan-Africanist icon, embodying the spirit of self-reliance and sovereignty. His government has rejected the victimhood narrative, leveraging Burkina Faso's vast mineral wealth, gold, manganese, zinc, and phosphate, to fund transformative development projects. Unlike his corrupt predecessors who squandered resources on personal gain, Traoré has redirected the nation's wealth toward the needs of its people, revolutionizing healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure, and education in ways that shame African leaders still begging for Western scraps. In the healthcare sector, Traoré's administration has achieved what many thought impossible: a sustainable, accessible system funded entirely by Burkina Faso's own resources. Using revenues from the country's gold mines, which produce over 50 tons annually, the government has invested heavily in medical infrastructure. State-of-the-art hospital equipment, from MRI machines to ventilators, has been procured for public hospitals, reducing the need for patients to seek treatment abroad. Mobile clinics, equipped with diagnostic tools and staffed by Burkinabe doctors, have been deployed to remote regions, bringing healthcare to communities long neglected by both the state and foreign NGOs. One of Traoré's most impactful reforms has been the reduction of hospital bills, which previously forced families into debt or left them without care. In 2024, the government slashed medical fees by up to 70% in public facilities, making treatment affordable for the masses. The story of Amina Diallo, a 12-year-old girl from the rural village of Koudougou, illustrates the human impact of these changes. Amina's mother, Fatoumata, contracted severe malaria in 2024, a condition that would have been a death sentence for many poor families. Thanks to Traoré's reforms, Fatoumata was treated as a newly equipped public hospital, where her bill was reduced to a fraction of its former cost. Amina, speaking to a local radio station, shared her gratitude. "I thought we would lose Mama because we had no money. The hospital gave her medicine, and we paid so little. Now Mama is healthy, and I want to be a doctor to help others like they help us. Amina's story is one of thousands, a testament to how Traore's policies are saving lives and restoring hope. The government has also prioritized training local medical professionals, reducing reliance on foreign doctors and NGOs. In 2024, Burkina Faso opened 2 new medical schools, funded by mineral revenues, to train the next generation of Burkinabe doctors and nurses. These efforts are building a healthcare system rooted in national pride, proving that Africa can care for its own without Western handouts. In agriculture, Traore's government is spearheading a revolution to achieve food security and economic independence. Burkina Faso's fertile lands, once exploited by foreign agribusinesses, are now being cultivated by local farmers, supported by state-backed cooperatives. The government has invested in modern farming equipment, irrigation systems, and high-yield seed banks, enabling farmers to boost productivity. In 2024, Burkina Faso banned the export of raw agricultural products like cotton and shea nuts, insisting that they be processed locally to create jobs and add value. This policy has led to a boom in local industries, from textile factories to shea butter processing plants, employing thousands of young Burkinabe. In the northern region of Yatenga, farmers like Mariam Sawadogo have seen their lives transform. Mariam, a 45-year-old mother of 6, used to struggle to feed her family on a small plot of land. With government-provided irrigation pumps and training, she now grows enough millet and sorghum to sell at local markets, earning a steady income. Before, we were at the mercy of the rains, Mariam told a local newspaper. Now we have water, seeds, and machines from our own country. Captain Traoré has given us back our dignity. This agricultural renaissance is reducing Burkina Faso's dependence on imported food, strengthening the economy, and empowering rural communities. Traoré's vision extends to infrastructure, where his government is building roads, bridges, and schools where none existed before. In the Sahel region, long plagued by insecurity and neglect, new paved roads have connected remote villages to markets and urban centers. In Djibo, a town once cut off by poor transport links, residents can now travel to Ouagadougou in hours rather than days. The government has purchased road-building equipment with mineral revenues, ensuring that infrastructure projects are driven by Burkinabe workers and resources. "We thought roads were only for the cities said Issa Ouedraogo, a farmer in Djibo. Now we can sell our crops without losing half to bad roads." Captain Traoré is showing us what Burkina Faso can do. In education, Traoré's government has built hundreds of new schools, particularly in rural areas, and provided free textbooks and uniforms to students. This investment in human capital is laying the foundation for a generation of educated Burkinabe who will drive the nation's future. By prioritizing local resources and talent, Traoré is proving that Africa can build its own infrastructure without relying on foreign loans or contractors. While Burkina Faso thrives under Traoré's leadership, other African leaders are gripped by fear as Trump's policies expose their vulnerabilities. In Nigeria, the government is scrambling to secure alternative funding to replace USAID, with officials reportedly holding emergency meetings to lobby Western donors. In Ghana, the loss of US aid has sparked a crisis in the health sector, with hospitals struggling to replace equipment once funded by USAID. In Ethiopia, the threat of the expanded travel ban has prompted a flurry of diplomatic overtures to Washington, with officials desperate to maintain access to US markets and visas. These leaders, who have grown complacent under Western patronage, are now paying the price for their failure to invest in their own people. For decades, they have relied on foreign aid to mask their corruption, using USAID funds to fund lavish lifestyles, while their citizens languished in poverty. Trump's cuts have stripped away this facade, revealing the rot at the heart of their governance. In contrast, Traoré's success is a stinging rebuke, embarrassing these leaders and exposing their weakness. His refusal to beg for Western aid or bow to sanctions has set a new standard for African leadership, challenging others to follow his example. Trump's policies, while intended to weaken Africa, have inadvertently highlighted the continent's greatest strength, its untapped potential. Africa is the world's richest continent in natural resources, holding 30% of global mineral reserves, including gold, diamonds, cobalt, lithium, and rare earth metals essential for technology and renewable energy. The continent is also a major exporter of agricultural products, supplying the world with cocoa, coffee, tea, cashews, and avocados. Africa's young and growing population, projected to reach 2.5 billion by 2050, represents a vast pool of human capital, ready to drive innovation and economic growth. Yet, for too long, Africa's wealth has been plundered by foreign powers, with corrupt leaders complicit in the exploitation. The continent's resources have fueled Western and Chinese industries, while African nations remain impoverished. Trump's travel bans and aid cuts are a reminder that the West views Africa as a pawn, not a partner. But this moment of crisis is also an opportunity, a chance for Africa to rise as a united, self-reliant force. If African leaders could unite, as Traoré has urged, the continent could become the most powerful force on Earth. A united Africa, with a single currency, visa, army, and language, would reshape the global order. Imagine an African currency, backed by the continent's gold, oil, and minerals, rivaling the dollar and euro in global trade. A single African visa would grant access to a market of 1.4 billion people, making it one of the most coveted travel documents in the world. A unified African army, drawing on the continent's vast human and material resources, would defend its sovereignty against any aggressor, ensuring that Africa is never again subjected to foreign domination. The potential of a united Africa is staggering. The continent could dominate global trade, leveraging its resources to dictate terms to the West and East alike. A unified Africa could invest in its own industries, from technology to manufacturing, creating millions of jobs for its youth. A single African language, perhaps Swahili, already spoken by over 200 million people, could foster cultural unity and ease communication across borders. With one visa, Africans could move freely across the continent, boosting intra-African trade, which currently accounts for only 15% of total trade, compared to 60% in Europe. If Africa united, the West, including the United States, would come begging. The US relies on African cobalt and lithium for electric vehicle batteries, rare earth metals for smartphones, and agricultural products for its food supply. A united Africa could demand fair prices for its resources, ending centuries of exploitation. The world would be shaken by an Africa that speaks with one voice, acts with one purpose, and stands with one strength. Donald Trump's policies, his travel bans, his aid cuts, his disregard for African sovereignty, have shocked the continent's corrupt elites, exposing their weakness and dependence on the West. But for leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré, these actions are a wake-up call, a challenge to reject neocolonialism and embrace self-reliance. Burkina Faso's transformation, fueled by its own resources and guided by a vision of sovereignty, is a blueprint for what Africa can achieve. Traoré's revolution in healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure, and education is not just changing Burkina Faso, it is inspiring a continent to rise up and reclaim its destiny. As corrupt leaders panic and scramble to appease Washington, Traoré stands as a beacon of defiance, proving that Africa does not need the West to thrive. His success is a challenge to every African leader to emulate his example, to harness the continent's vast wealth, and to unite for a common purpose. Africa is not weak, it is powerful. Its minerals, its people, its potential are unmatched. If Africa unites, with one currency, one visa, one army, and one voice, it will not only shape the world, it will lead it. The time for dependence is over. The time for African sovereignty has begun. Let the world take notice. Africa is rising, and nothing, not even Donald Trump, can stop it.